Hey everyone, I just want to say thanks for following along. So let's get right into it. We're going to talk about the 10-shot improvement matrix, and it really is just a deep dive into the way I look at the swing. We're just going to look at swing systems today. For future, we'll look at some other stuff. So just quickly who I am. My name is Cam Lancaster. I run an online mentorship with about 30 members from 7 different countries and quite a few states represented, as you can see there. I've worked with golfers more than 5 different pros and Epson Tour, Asian Tour, and a lot of mini tours. Worked with more than 10 NCAA Division I players, a lot of junior competitive golfers, and then many club champs. In person, my academy is at Copetown Woods up in Ancaster, Ontario, just south of Toronto. The Golfers Academy, Burlington, VTL, Milton. I'm an ambassador for TaylorMade, Total Golf Trainer, Stack System, Golf Forever in one club, and I'm also a pro golfer on the Toronto Players Tour. So let's just quickly, before we get into the mentorship, look at my client success stories. This is something that I'm very proud of. In the last 5 years, I've accumulated more than 100 5-star reviews on Google and Instagram, thousands of lessons conducted, and more than 500 clients served in a span of 5 years. This is something for me that I take a lot of pride in, and it is to me, golf coaching is a vocation and something that I've dedicated my life to. And it really all started for me with, trying to get my own game better. And, through the process of getting my own game better, I realized that I was starting to help some friends and starting to see some results, and did a lot of deep dives on different coaches. And I was lucky to be around some unbelievable coaches growing up, guys like Ralph Bauer and Scott Couse, PGA Tour coaches, and they certified me in their methods, and pretty much a lot of the framework of the way I coach is based upon what they've passed down to me. So I've had a really, been very lucky to have an incredible mentorship growing up. So let's get right into it. So the 10-shot improvement matrix is something you're probably curious about. What does it exactly mean? Sounds like a little bit of voodoo, but it is really a detailed process for the way I take someone through a swing change. And, it's not just looking at a swing from at face value and then trying to make changes to make it look prettier. I think that's still what I see a lot with in-person coaches and online coaches, is that they're trying to fit it into some sort of mold and some sort of model, which I just think doesn't work, because we all have a very different set of biomechanics that we're dealing with. Some people are injured in certain parts of their body. Some people have mobility limitations. Other people are shorter, taller. Swing speed is a factor too. So, when I look at this sort of pie chart here, we always look at the initial TrackMan data. Like, that's where I start any of my clients out. So looking at the path, the face, the attack angle. So club path is where the club is traveling at the moment of impact. So, are they out to in, or are they in to out, and what causes that? And then we look at face angle. So, how consistent is the face angle? I think that's the most important thing, not necessarily the direction of it. Like, yes, it is nice for it to be down around 0. I've had a lot of my pro golfers have some really good success when they get their club path to -1 and their face to -1, because they're hitting small little pulls all day. And that's just one small example, right? I mean, we also look at the ratio between face and path, and that's a big one, because, you could have a 4-degree in-out path, and if it's 4 degrees shut, you have an 8-degree difference in face to path. Well, you're pretty much going to hit a hook every time. So first, the goal would be to maybe not necessarily move the club path to 0, but get the face a little bit more open, so there's a more of a clean face to path relationship, right? And the beauty of working off of that, what I've found is that you can put a beginner on this, you can put a pro on this, and intermediate golfers too, and you're going to start to see some really quick improvements, right? So it is that initial upfront stuff, and I think to me it's 40% of the swing, just getting that correct, right? So the simple ways you could work on club path is shoulder alignment, right? Like, shoulders are huge, and then working on your face, it's a lot to do with getting more consistent grip, right? I mean, that would be it at a baseline level. I mean, we look at the way the club travels for club path on the way down, and with face angle, it could be wrist angles would be the actual application in the swing. But it can get, as you can see here, it can get very complex, right? And my job as a coach is, how do we translate it in a way that's simple to the golfer, right? Because there are so many different swing theories out there. There's so much going on with the swing in general, and there's a lot of coaches that they're coaching up based upon a model, right? Which, hey, I've been guilty of that before, right? But I think that the most important thing is finding what's right for the golfer. We don't need to do some crazy rebuild. We just need to understand, where is your data at, and how do we build feels and drills to get the data a lot tighter, right? The next part of this initial TrackMan data is the angle of attack, AOA, and that, I like to rely on a lot of PGA Tour data and LPGA Tour data based on if it's a man or a lady I'm coaching. So ideally liking to see the irons around between -3 and -5. I mean, it's you look at certain golfers like Brooks Koepka, who's probably a -8 with the 6 iron, and then you look at some that are a lot more shallow, maybe around -2 with the 7 iron. So it's just about figuring out what is the most predictable attack angle that golfer needs. I mean, definitely the one most common thing I see with, and this is why golfers have really trouble hitting it far distances. The everyday golfer, let's call it, is the attack angle's too deep, right? With the attack angle being too deep, there's a lot of spin on the ball, and it gets chewed up by the wind, and probably most likely slicing it, right? So there's definitely different many ways that we can fix angle of attack. A lot of it comes in the stance, a lot of it is in our intention through the golf ball, right? Like intentionally trying to hit up on it, I think, is just a simple drill that you can work on. A super high tee, and that it should be so uncomfortably high that if you make your normal swing, you're going to sky it, right? So you just get a bit of a different feel through impact. And so that's kind of the way I like to work with a lot of my clients, is working through a feel as opposed to, drills are great, but do drills really translate to the golf course, right? And I really don't think they do often. So how can you generate some sort of feel in your body that counteracts your flaw, right? Now, that's the starting point. And sometimes, we just go for the initial TrackMan data, and we're going to work kind of this way on the pie chart. But just to kind of go the other way for a second, if I get someone who's like a weekend warrior, and they don't have 20 hours to work on their swing on a weekly basis, we'll probably just go through the initial TrackMan data and go right to on-course application, right? So we'll talk about that in a second, but let's kind of go down to the bottom here and look at the long-term biomechanics, right? And I only put that at 10% because this is something that, we're talking about 10-shot improvement, right? You're not going to improve by working on these crazy big movements that your body, that's foreign to your body, right? I mean, there's always an element to it with every golfer that I work with where I want them to get better 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And, stuff. So basically the swing building that we're working on is, there's just a bit of a typo in here. So it's tilting, so side bend, right? Staying in your spine tilt. So just imagine like your spine is like this at your posture. You want to remain there, as opposed to coming up out of your spine angle as you come through impact. And then you're rotating, so your torso is rotating through the target, and instead of turning, it would be shifting. So you look at any tour pro, on average, from the top of their swing, so P4 down to P7, which is impact, they're moving about 4 to 6 inches towards the target. Like the perfect example of that would be Rory McIlroy, probably one of the best shifters in the world, right? So I look at it from a lens of what do elite tour pros do? Well, they all shift, they turn, and they tilt, right? So if you can get all three of those things, then you're probably hitting it pretty damn well, right? Now within that too, we'll just actually save that for a little bit later. But yeah, so the long-term biomechanics, like the way we would actually work that into someone's game is, okay, I want you to just 50 times at home at night, just drill that new thing, right? You don't necessarily have to take this to the golf course. Now, when you get that off-season push, then yeah, for sure, I want you to work at that quite a bit. But for now, it's just, do it maybe at home and don't stress about it too much. And then over time, it'll start to seep into your actual swing, right? So motor patterns are very important, right? And I think the smartest way to work on your motor patterns is with visual cues, right? So alignment sticks on the ground. Like you look at the way Tommy Fleetwood is always practicing, and he's got that, I think it's called a plane mate. He's always got the swing plane thing on the ground, and he's just ensuring that his exit path is going to a certain way, right? So that would, long-term biomechanics, moving on. And this kind of gets woven into the initial TrackMan data, but it definitely has a place to me that is very important in the swing, and I lump them all together just because they're kind of like the things that are outside the technique, right? So, when I think technique of the swing, I think like the active motion of the swing. When we think about setup mechanics, like one thing that I was very lucky to be mentored on growing up was by a guy named Ralph Bauer, and he was very, very strict on me with my alignment, my setup, the grip, stance width, ball position. Like you look at what PGA Tour players do, and there's a bit of a formula to it, right? Like, we could talk through that formula. Like their ball position is probably closer to front, right? And it doesn't change too much, and that makes the low point of your swing arc very consistent. The feet are at a certain width, right? So they're probably going to be close to under your shoulders if you're being disciplined with it. The feet are slightly toed out. The knees are over the middle of the shoe. The bum is slightly tucked. The alignment of the shoulders, the wrists, the knees, and the feet are all in a nice line, right? And that's the stuff, even posture, spine is in a certain angle. Like that to me is the stuff that golfers suck at, right? Like I've given a lot of lessons on TrackMan, worked with probably more than 500 golfers on TrackMan in the past 5 years. And we're a lot more consistent than we'd like to admit with our actual swing, but we're very inconsistent with our setup mechanics, right? And that's the stuff to me that changes a lot more on a day-to-day basis. And the reason it changes is, you might be playing a golf course that has a lot of trouble on the right side, and you might just start aiming all the way to the left, and that affects your alignment on the next course you play on, where let's say trouble's all up the left, and then you're aiming to the right, or you might start missing it one way. That's probably the most common thing, and you try and compensate for it, right? So, I think some things that you can build into your game, something you can take away from this, and you look at a PGA Tour range, all of them have alignment sticks on the ground, right? So just having a stick for your foot line, maybe for your start lineup from between the ball and the target, and just staying disciplined with that start line. Next piece of that is tempo. So one thing I did a few years back was I made it a project for myself. It was just a personal learning thing I wanted to do because I really wanted to understand, as a pro golfer, well, what works at the highest level, right? So I made it a chore for myself to listen to anywhere between 30 to 50 podcasts of elite PGA Tour players, guys like Steve Stricker, Jim Furyk, on podcasts or interviews talking about, well, what do they actually work on, right? And the thing that kept coming up was tempo. I mean, it sounds pretty obvious, but I think it's something that's often overlooked. Like, you could have really nice technique in your swing, but if your tempo is shit, what is it good for, right? So I think you should, within your practice, you should have a portion of it dedicated to tempo. And I mean, simple ways you work on your tempo, just taking your driver out in your backyard and making 10 really nice rhythmic swings and feeling good tempo. Now, everyone has a bit of a different understanding of the way they perceive tempo. Generally, for average to intermediate players, I want them to work towards swinging smoother. If you have really clean TrackMan data, usually better players, I want you to work on being more aggressive because it typically will work better with more speed, right? So you just have to have a tempo thought that, to me, you work on, right? Like, for me, it's always being as aggressive as possible, right? Like, if I'm the more aggressive I am, the better I am. Yeah, every golfer has a different level of coordination, and I think the way to, there's definitely many ways you can work on coordination. Like, the way I work on coordination growing up, and you see Tiger do this with his putting, is a lot of one-handed shots. So you start out putting with one hand, you start out chipping with one hand, you move up to swinging with one hand. Like, I had one kid that I worked with in the NCAA, and he was able to hit a 7-iron one-handed 150 yards. High level of coordination, right? So, work on both hands. Like, I remember during COVID, I would, I had a bunch of time to kill because I wasn't able to coach. So I, went in the backyard and hit 50 swings with just my left hand, and then 50 swings with just my right hand. And I did that every day for about a month, and my coordination was really, really good. Swing wasn't the best at the time, but I was probably hitting it the best I ever had, just because I was really disciplined with the coordination aspect. Other ways you can work coordination is hitting balls with your eyes closed. Just make sure no one's around when you're doing it. Maybe lining up. This is like a common junior drill I'll do, is line up 3 to 5 balls in a row and hit them all at the same time and just try and hit the center of the face. Coordination awareness is really important too. So if you hit into a net at home, grab some white face tape off of Amazon or some shoe spray and just understand where you're hitting it on the face all the time. And then you could hit balls off of 1 foot, balls like your eyes closed too, like I mentioned. So coordination, really important part of the swing. So moving on to the next quadrant here, that lighter purple color, TrackMan imperatives. So this is a little bit more for my higher level players, but I think, if you're a curious golfer, wanting to get into the 90s to the 80s to the 70s, I definitely think this stuff can help, and I've worked on them with everyday golfers before. So my coach, Scott Cowks, is a guy I've been working with for 13 years, and I work out of one of his academies, and he's certified more than 3,000 golf coaches, PGA Tour coach, absolute genius with the swing. He came up with 5 numbers, and basically he had determined that tour pros are consistent within a certain degree. I'm not going to kind of give away the whole thing, but he talked about how club head speed, swing direction, swing plane, impact offset, and low point, they're basically consistent within a certain amount of degree on TrackMan, right? So I use that as a bit of a guide, right? Like, it's almost like a testing session. So I'll get one of my online clients to basically just put those 5 numbers up and then maybe add the path, the face, and the attack angle, and I'm looking at their consistency metrics with those five, right? So let's take low point as an example, right? If their low point is jumping all over the place and it's very inconsistent, well, we probably need to work on wrist angles and loading structure and just in general, maybe ball position to get that low point a lot more clean, right? So there's a lot of different based upon those 5 numbers, there's a lot of different things that you can do to fix it, right? Like club head speed, for instance. If your club head speed is really inconsistent, well, it might actually be a good idea for you to do a bunch of speed training so you get a very consistent level of firing, right? That you're able to do every time. So the final one is, and I mentioned this before, but on course application, right? So to me, if you just work on your swing alone, yes, you're going to get a little bit better. But if you work on the way to apply it to the golf course, to me, you're going to get a lot better. And this is where that, again, the 10-shot improvement matrix comes in. Something that I was really, forced into growing up and made me a good player. Like I was a scratch golfer by the age of 14. Was routines, mindset, the way we practice. That's the stuff to me that actually really takes it to the golf course, right? And when I write a custom practice plan out for my online members, I make sure that they are aware that, hey, they should be making a routine, they should be thinking about mindset, and they should be thinking about practice, right? And then having a system for it, right? So I'll give you just a simple outline of the way I would coach a routine. I think everyone's gonna have their own flavor to the routine, but it should come with a very clean decision, right? So making a decision on the shot that you're going to hit that you feel really comfortable with, seeing your shot, so visualization, right? Whether you like to see a low draw or a high draw or a low cut or whatever, you got to see your shot, right? It could be a dotted line to the target. It could be a straight line to the target. I like to see visualizing the shot tracer like you'd see on TV. And then you want to make 1 or 2 practice swings where you really feel your motion, right? As opposed to think it, right? So you're just feeling, like you're not really thinking about swing thoughts. And then you stand behind the ball, nice, relaxed, deep breath, walk in nice and relaxed, get your alignment down, so alignment station, and then 1 look at the target as you do your trigger, and then go. And a trigger could be a waggle, it could be a knee kick, it could be a little footstep, something to keep you in motion. It's like the way Brad Faxon talked about his putting routine. He does a little forward press and then releases it. Think about like an old-fashioned golfer like Lee Trevino. He would do a 3-step shuffle and then hit, something to keep yourself in motion, right? Because the moment you get static over the ball is when you're dead, right? So routines are very important, right? Like anytime I get a golfer that tells me, oh, I love my 7-iron, but I hate my 6-iron, that immediately I think, well, you probably don't have a good routine because you're based upon the scenario, you're changing your outlook on the shot, right? Like if you really work on your routine and really listen to this, like you'll get to the point where no matter what shot you have, no matter what scenario you're in, no matter what club you're hitting, it feels the same, right? And it almost kind of it takes the emotion out of it, right? Like Tiger's dad, very smart in the way he taught him from a young age. In the military they talk about standard operating procedures, and this is just a standard operating procedure that if you execute on every time in the heat of battle, you think about war, right? You're going to be able to execute it at a very high level and not get emotional, right? So the biggest thing in golf is how do we be as emotional as you want after the shot, right? As long as you're not snapping your clubs. But how do we regulate those emotions before we hit the shot, right? Next thing is mindset, right? I mean, this is a pretty simple one, but I think it's something that's often overlooked, especially with a lot of male golfers. It's like, oh, it's nice to be positive, but if my swing's shit, then what's the point, right? And I think there's a huge point to it because mindset can really help you see the light of progress, right? Like if you're making those small little gains every day and you have a positive mindset, those small little gains stack up a little cleaner. But if you have a poor mindset and you have a bad hitting session, like this might be a bit of a call out for some clients, but I get a lot of clients that as soon as they have a bad session, they blow me up and say, Cam, what's going on? Like, I don't understand. And I get it. Like, it's frustrating and I've been there before, but it's just one bad hitting session, right? Or if it's just a bad week of hitting, or it's just a bad month of hitting, like this game is so damn cyclical, and you have to have a resilient mindset as you go through it. And if you don't, then just play for fun, right? Like don't worry about challenging yourself, right? But I think like if you have that mindset that golf is really hard, I'm going to stay positive no matter what, and I know that for me personally, my best golf is ahead of me, and you say that to yourself a lot, I think it really holds a lot of weight. And that goes to, I learned all that stuff from Bob Rotella, who's arguably the best golf coach of all time. Like I think he's been accredited for winning more than 85 majors as a coach, which is Butch Harmon he's probably up there with him. So yeah, when you hear that from a guy who's helped some golfers win more than 85 majors just with working on mental game stuff, I think it's worth listening to. And then practice, right? I think this is like the big X factor to me that is off the course, but you take it to the course. There has to be a level of gamifying your practice, right? Like I think there's always, you probably hear so much of block practice where you set up alignment sticks, you hit to the same target, you do the same thing over and over and over again. But to me, what I never see, like, and I coach half the year on a driving range, so I see it at a public course, nice public course, and see a lot of golfers who spend a lot of money on their game, and they spend a lot of time on their game. I never see smart practice. I just see a bucket of balls, hit it. I see drop 3 balls down, hit 10 putts, go to the first tee, right? This is something that kind of comes from Rotella, but if you started to develop smart practice for getting ready for playing and getting ready for practicing, I think is super important. So like Rotella suggests that his guys play the first 5 or 6 holes on the driving range before they go and actually play. So you're getting to the first tee and you feel like, oh, I've already played 6 holes, right? And another thing that, I witnessed this when I was a kid. I saw the national team, Canada national team, playing at the tournaments we played at. Guys like Corey Connors, Mackenzie Hughes, another guy named Albin Choi, some unbelievable players, Taylor Pendrith. They would, their practice was just a lot of up and down competitions, right? Playing for a little bit of money here and there. And that's something that me and my buddy started to do, and me and my brother started to do. And lo and behold, they both made the NCAA Division I. And a lot of it was just through those gritty up and down competitions we'd have playing for, a sleeve of Pro V1s. Like as a kid playing for a sleeve of Pro V1s, you definitely, it definitely, lights a fire under your ass, right? So, if you can gamify your practice, it makes practice more fun, right? Like my practice these days, just because I'm playing more professional golf than I am just playing for leisure, is about 90% gamified, right? So I'm playing virtual holes on the range. I'm going and doing up and down competitions from really tough scenarios. Like I want to be, drop a ball, step on it, try and get up and down, right? Or drop a ball downhill lie in a bunker, try and get it up and down. Downhill lie, no green to work with, try and get it up and down, right? And then I'll do putting where I'll actually, a putting game where I'll actually mirror what I would do on the golf course. So like I look at my statistics and I'm on average hitting 12 to 13 greens in regulation per round. So I'm going to give myself 12 birdie putts from random ranges. You can even go as far as tracking what your average distance is to the hole in putts. Usually it's around 16 to 20 feet. And then you'll have, 12, I'll have 12 birdie putts, and then I'll have maybe one bogey saver, for an error. And then, the next, let's say 5 holes is par savers from various distances, right? And you can actually keep score on that, right? Like for the up and down, you can keep stats on, like, to me, a good up and down goal would be like 50%. Just start at 50%. You'd be surprised. That's actually a pretty damn good number to work off of. And then putting, if you can basically score 36 or better on 18 holes of putting, then you're doing pretty well. And if you don't have that time, to do all that, maybe just do 5 holes of up and down, and maybe do 5 holes of putting before you go and play, and go through your routine and actually, again, gamify it. Gamify it to me means it can translate to the golf course very easily, right? So that's a gist of the 10-shot improvement matrix. If you have any more questions for it, hit me up on Instagram at Lancaster Golf Performance. If you're curious about my mentorship, I'd highly suggest that you apply. You can look below in the link, and you'll be able to do the application process. And just based upon the answers that you give, you're going to be able to book a free 30-minute call with me to talk about what you're struggling with, what your dreams are, and more about the mentorship. Best of luck. Thanks so much for listening, and stay tuned for a lot more videos just like this.